also an urban planner, which is why this session interests me a lot. And yeah, I'll be moderating this session today. And welcome to everyone. Welcome to the panelists and attendees. And thank you for coming for this session about equitable and affordable housing. So I guess let's start by introductions with all the panelists. So maybe Ruth, Ann, you could start.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruth Ann Norton, and I'm the president and CEO of the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. We were established in 1986 in Baltimore as Parents Against Lead, and today work nationwide on advancing racial equity and addressing the social determinants of health through healthy housing.
Thank you. Maybe Daniel, you could go next.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel del Pielago. I am the organizing director with Empower DC. I've worked there, going on 10 years now. We are a grassroots organization, membership-based organization. We work around the city and we work around several different issues. Public housing, we work in this neighborhood called Ivy City. We've used other campaigns. We use campaigns as vehicles to build power for people of color, low-income people in the district, and threats to folks' health and well-being through poor housing, environmental issues are a common thread. So thank you for having us this afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Walkiria, and I'm the president and founder of CEEJH, Centro de Apoyo Familiar, or Center for Assistance to Families, CAF. We were founded in 2006 in the state of Massachusetts, and in 2009, we decided to expand to the state of Maryland, specifically in Prince George's County, due to the main foreclosure crisis that happened back then. We have been very engaged with environmental justice and environmental issues since 2012. We've been doing a lot of grassroots and education on the environmental issues specifically. I'm also recently took over the position of co-chair for the Maryland Environmental and Economic Justice Table for the state of Maryland. And so we've been working on creating a coalition that together can work on some EJ issues in the state of Maryland. And I'm very glad and happy to be in this panel to share some of the best practices, but also ideas how we can improve our work. We mainly serve low-income communities, specifically minority, Hispanic, or immigrant community. And so we have been very, very successful for the last years that we assist in doing community outreach, pretty much.
That's great. Great to hear from you all, and welcome again. So how this format of the session today will work is that we'll have questions and then you can all take turns to answer them. And so let's jump straight into it. So the first question is talking about livability, right? So it's important to discuss livability in the broader conversation on equitable and affordable housing. How does substandard housing serve as a health hazard and serve as an environmental justice issue?
I'm happy to jump in if you want. I didn't know if we had an order. So we're
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tee up everyone else, I hope. But we got into this work, and I got into this work around lead poisoning as a critical element and linchpin around substandard housing in Baltimore, because kids who I was tutoring and working with at the Franciscan Youth Center, I saw not able to compete in the classroom against their peers. And the more that I dug into the issue and started visiting my mentees in their homes and visiting with their families, what became incredibly clear is what we know in our work is that if you are living in low-income communities, especially Black and brown communities in this country that have been historically set aside. At the housing conditions have caused lead poisoning, asthma, injury, and displacement to become normal. And so what you see in the sort of unjust and ill-conceived policies in the United States that have led to these problems. In 1937, we had a uniform housing code set out for health and safety in this country. And in 1938, mandated the use of lead-based paint, a known toxin that was killing babies, to be used in low-income housing. It's almost enough said there as to where our public policy really undermined the future of generations. But on top of that, by lack of housing code, by lack of investment, mold, mildew, and moisture lead to respiratory issues. Asthma is the #1 reason kids don't get to school. So if you couple the high rate of lead poisoning from old chipping, peeling lead-based paint, and that damages the brain and has cognitive impact on third grade level reading, long-term impact on graduation rates, kids poisoned by lead are 7 times more likely, less likely to graduate, and they'll earn $1.5 million less than their peers over the course of a lifetime. Also higher rates of hypertension, cardiac arrest, and a 46% early mortality. Add into that injury, displacement, and the impact of poorly weatherized housing, which not only hurts our climate today, but has a massive impact on trauma in economic health, has massive impact on respiratory health and the structure of housing. I'll stop there just to say what unhealthy housing does is not only rob kids and families of their full potential, it stops intergenerational wealth transfer through real estate, and it impedes the ability to get a fair, right, and full education, which equips people to pursue equitable opportunities.
I think I can echo what Ruth just mentioned is in addition to, what she said, one of the problems that we see happening as well are the in-house chemicals that has been used inside these homes. And we've seen a number of pesticides that has been used, mold, all of that at the end of the day translate as, what Ruth mentioned is the health of the family, not just the kids, but a lot of the things that I see happening even for women, pregnant women, women who, because of asthma, because it's something that been brought up since they were young, just lack the opportunity for them to move on with jobs because they have to spend more time in the ER dealing with the issue than what they can really work. So we can see there how economically this affect. And so I'm thinking that the lack of information, a lot of these people, they have no idea what's happening, what's coming into these places, especially very low income community, multifamily homes where the conditions are really bad. Nobody knows what's going on there. And many of the residents, they cannot say anything because they're afraid that if they say something, they're gonna be kicked out of the space, kicked out of the place, and it's the only place that they can probably afford, because otherwise they won't be able to get something that can allow them to have a root in their location. And in addition to it, if you are the immigration or immigrant, specifically for the immigrant community, sometimes we see number of families living together in an environment that is not safe. Again, they're scared to say anything because they might be reported, because they might be taken out and won't have a place where to live. So there's a lot of physical environmental issues, but there's also indoor issues that are having, indoor environmental issues that are going on, and it has long-term effects in the entire families.
Yeah, and I'll just I'll say I agree with both of my co-panelists. I think Ruth Ann said it well. Like, for us, what we see a lot of this disregard, and this has been for decades now, at least for the work that we do in public housing, is it is a tool for displacement. It's human made. We've allowed these conditions to get worse, thus creating these horrible environmental conditions for people to live in that not only affect their physical well-being, but also their mental well-being. And that has become crystal clear in a double whammy during COVID, where, for over a year now, we were asked to stay home, to stay at home. For many people, staying at home is as, a bigger risk as going out there and interacting and potentially contracting the coronavirus. It's unsafe to stay at home for many people because of the exposure to lead, which here in the district it's been confirmed that the majority of the public housing stock has unacceptable levels of lead. The mold that occurs because houses deteriorate and water damage just gets terrible. The exposure or infestation rather of rodents and insects, all of that serves to create an environment that does not bode well for people, for young people. I'll just relate in closing. I'll relate a quick story. We were recently, well, not recently, a year or so ago, before the pandemic, we were at a meeting that the Housing Authority held, the DC Housing Authority held, around these redevelopments that were going to be happening. And the Housing Authority has used the narrative that, oh, we finally realized that yes, the conditions are really bad, so we're going to have to do something about it. We're clear that that's about privatization. However, a resident, after we were debriefing this meeting, said, no wonder it was hard for me to learn how to read. Like, I grew up in these horrible conditions. I think that it's very clear the relationship between poor living conditions, poor housing conditions, and health outcomes for people in general.
Yeah, if I could just, I think two things I heard. One is this fear of losing your house if you say something about it. This is a very institutionalized fear that has gone on for generations and is so deep in communities around health that it's so critically important. And in addition to the fear is the stigma. But if you even think about what was being said about asthma earlier, think about a parent who has a child with asthma. That child doesn't even necessarily have to go to the emergency room to cause them to miss school, and that parent to miss work. It all kind of comes down, but that child's not sleeping through the night. It deteriorates the family's ability to both get to the classroom and get to work. That's especially true. But if we, can think about the opportunity that comes out of this, which is all the cost is so unnecessary and all the potential that is put down instead could be turned around through cost savings in the healthcare system, through better opportunity, better stability. And, Daniel was mentioning mental health and trauma, which I think is so undermeasured in poor housing condition and should be measured deeply. But, right now we are fighting for $45 billion in the Senate Banking Committee to go for lead so that we can address what is known. It's a $170 billion issue just to address 14 million homes that have present lead hazards where families earn $35,000 or less. That's not even talk about the middle market, upper markets. 170 billion. We're asking Congress for 45 billion. It's not an over ask, but it's 84% of the reason kids get poisoned is from paint. And we are doing a better job of funding lead service lines, which are important, but only 10% of the problem.
Very important points. And also to resonate with what Daniel was saying about COVID and mental health, and something I think all of us touched upon. I'm from India, and a lot of people, as some of you might know, live in slums there, and 10, 20 people are sharing like one tiny apartment. And thinking about things like that is so important when it comes to equitable housing or anything on those lines. So yeah, definitely agree with that. And so a lot of you touched upon children, right? And what kind of impact such a situation has on them. And so the next question, this is a good segue to the next question, which was a lot of affordable housing does not accommodate families with children. And so what opportunities exist to improve the standard of affordable housing for them? How can we incentivize the construction of better and safer units for those in the community that bear the burden of poverty? So maybe, yeah, whoever wants to start.
Well, I was just, oh, I'm sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
No, please go right ahead.
No, I just was gonna say, adding into the same question, maybe the same line. I think we have to start thinking about how do we engage the community? Are the developers and the one involved really taking a look at what community they're serving? Because if we take a look closely and if we engage the community as we'll build up affordable housing, we'll know what is the statistic show, what is the census saying, what are the needs. And one of the things we are in Prince George's County, and one of the things that we keep seeing is we have a lot of kids, we have a lot of young people, we haven't, some of the other issues in some communities, the senior community. So how do we really start thinking about when building, accommodating to the community itself that you're serving, and put aside, this is just about money, which unfortunately is the reality, but a lot of the thing is driven by that. But we need to start pushing. How can we get more community engaged? We are a housing, HUD-approved counseling agency. And one of the things that I feel is that I wish we can have more housing agency involved in the conversations when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to developer or developing new new developments in the community. We are not being invited to those communications, to those conversations. Where are we? Like, how can we be more engaged? Because we know what's going on. We know what is needed. We know how to integrate the community. Why aren't we more present on those tables, on those conversations when it comes to making decisions? And that I have to start there. I'm very concerned that future developing or developers that has been happening throughout the DMV, the community is not being participating in those decisions. It's more political driven, it's more money driven, it's not community driven. And that's where start the whole issue right there. So Daniel, sorry.
No, thank you for that. And that was going to be along the lines of what I was going to say. I would offer that we also have to be able to hold on to what we have, right? There's, for example, and I think my whole lens on this is going to be through public housing, is, public housing is housing that can house, families with 6 to 8 children. There are 6-bedroom units in the district, and I'm sure it's similar around the country. So I think we have to do a better job of holding on to what we have and not giving it away to developers. I think I get a little worried when I hear how do we incentivize developers to do something, because their incentive, and let's just be clear on this, is making money. There are very few developers out there whose real drive is not making as much money as they can. So I think holding on to what we have is really important. But as Walkiria says, we need to be involved in these conversations. We need to plan not for where the city wants to go, but for what the city really needs. Right here in the district, under the administration of Anthony Williams, a couple of mayors ago, he called for bringing in 100,000 new residents to the district. They built this. They are now retrofitting the city to accommodate that instead of the families that lived here. And we've seen such a high rate of displacement in the city. And just another quick story, I actually lived down the road from UMD, Riverdale Park. I used to live in the district, and I lived in a co-op called the Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community Co-op. And it was a wonderful place where activist women, Black women, were able to acquire several buildings right by Meridian Hill Park, Malcolm X Park, which is right in Midtown DC. And they own a significant amount of real estate right next to one of the buildings that we owned then, or still own, but when I was there, developers bought one of the homes next door to that and added an extra floor and called it the Ivory Towers. So now this is what we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with people, developers catering to the highest dollar. So something has to change, not systemically and in our values, to not wholly monetize housing, right? Like this is a big word. The decommodification of housing is something we have to look at because there's just too much money to be made. I'm getting on my socialist platform here, but in a capitalist state, there's just too much greed. It boils down to that, and I will leave it at that.
Let me swing it over a little bit on the social capital side, if you will. But to say that I think one of the challenges is we need to invest more ownership in community. It is about getting to the table, but it is about directing dollars for ownership. There is just, I think when Ms. Poole was talking, there is such unconscious collusion about things, how they work, conscious and unconscious collusion, right? And, there are people who think they are doing good for community, and yet everything they're doing is really not there. But there is real opportunity to bring the healthcare sector, who really is now being driven by social determinants of health, and the opportunities to team with residents in occupied housing, where there is so much opportunity for mutual win in the renovation of that. But there is also, we have to be very clear with our elected officials. And I'm going to be very bold here, right? Here I am, the older white woman, going to say this. Just because an African-American is elected, or a Hispanic is elected, or an Indian or a white person is elected, we cannot count that they're going to do the right thing even for their own community without accountability structures, without really saying, having that there is real community engagement, right? Because getting in the offices that elected officials take, regardless of ethnicity or race or gender, have so much institutional structure that it gets people blown off course at times on what they may want to have, or what they had articulated when they're running, or whatever may be in their heart, but the system pushes there. But I do think that there is so much opportunity in better health that is in fact monetizable and is in fact a good business for so many, even though I agree with Daniel, it should be the standard thing to do for our moral compass, for a baseline that we should not negotiate. But there are really, on Monday, I'm going to be at a press conference where we have a hospital investing $50 million to abate lead hazards in a town of 90,000 people. And they're giving money to do that. And they're not going to save healthcare dollars, because you don't save healthcare dollars on the treatment of lead kids, right? You do on asthma, you do on injury. So there is value in pushing the social determinants of health frame, and deep value in pushing ownership with contractors, of the developers, and pushing the agenda in that way.
Yeah, great points. I think both sides are important, right? Finding other avenues to unfortunately keep the commodification sector there too, because sometimes that's just how things work. But then without the community, it's really hard to deliver something that's meaningful to them, that delivers their needs. So yeah, definitely great points. And so we hinted upon policy a little bit in this. Walkiria, did you?
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna add something before we move on to the next question.
Definitely.
You know, it's adding to the great point that Ruth mentioned about getting the politicians, you know, to focus. Of course, we get them there, but then once they're there, they forget about what they promised the people. And one of the things that I'm dealing with right now is that, yes, they keep calling us, yeah, get the community involved, invite the community to talk. Community already lost faith and trust. They don't want to be used no more. And even though we push them to come and be part of the conversation and all these budget revision, they know at the end of the day, it's just being put up there to say that it's been done, but at the end of the day, they will make their own decision. And one of the, I'm struggling with that right now because the community is refusing to be coming to those meetings because they know they have been used so many times just to say that we working with the community because the community was there, but was never done what the community really needed. And second of all, the community is not being educated well enough. They keep using a terminology that the community has no idea what they're talking about. And so it's been a complete setup. And so as a community-based organization, I'm struggling with the community to come and support what the local officials want us to do. Why? Because it's not, they don't hear what we have to say. They don't hear what the community have to say. So something has to happen. And part of the coalition conversation that we have is let's make the conversation in the level that the community can understand. Don't be throwing up, terms and things that people have no idea what it is and what the result is gonna be, that it will be going against them. And so that's why getting the community organization involved, and not just some community organizations. If we're talking about equality, let's invite all the community organizations, big and small, to be part of this conversation. Because sometimes, because you're small, because you don't have the big budget to have somebody all the time in Annapolis, or to have somebody, talking, just talking, they don't invite you to the conversations. And we see happening that all the time. And, just with my own experience, I just have to say something have to change. And in order for that to change, the answer to those changes is on us. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation. There's so many people in here in the platform in this meeting that will be able to hear and say, something have to change, because if we continue to repeat the same thing, we'll continue to see the same result.
Thank you for that, Walkiria. Yeah, very important points. And something needs to happen, right? Some kind of structure, some kind of system in place where meaningful community engagement happens, and actually all the communities involved. I definitely resonate with that. So we touched upon policy a little bit, and I'm going to pull us into the policy world now and ask you all to talk about, we all know that structural racism is the root cause for a lot of these inequalities faced by people. What if we applied a racial equity lens on housing policy decisions? How would that, affect things on the ground? What kind of change would that make? So let's talk about that.
I think you can go directly to how housing policies have been applied and how they should be applied, right? To start on the racial equity. In cities across the nation, in Washington and in Baltimore and in our region, cities and townships, large and small, housing commissioners have repeatedly not upheld housing code standards in low-income communities, therefore degrading the housing stock by not having the same expectation of housing standard and effectively creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. So not upholding landlords to have quality, safe, healthy units on the marketplace. We have disinvested in communities and in such a way that low-income homeowners have lost resources to maintain their own home. And so when they get older, they're less likely to be able to age in place with health and dignity, which means there will not be intergenerational wealth transfer, which has been the purview of so much wealth building in the white community over the course of generation. And so we deplete that entirely. We can, in Baltimore, we have what we call the Black Butterfly, a great also book by Lawrence Brown from Morgan State, but where you can draw out the communities where we have health issues, we have foreclosure issues, we have housing code issues, we have crime. It is all there because universally we've been addressing the application of our laws, our investments, our supports, and our aspirations, our civic aspirations are not put on our lowest income communities. We have a deficit mindset about our lowest income communities and an aspirational mindset. So that for our white communities and our more gentrified and our higher income communities. And when you put an aspirational mindset, you're going to drive development support and things that will increase health. Baltimore, like other cities, right? But we have, if you live in Roland Park, you're going to live 20 years longer, which is a higher income white community than in Cherry Hill, which is a very low income African-American community, where we also allow the smelter, the incinerator to be placed, right? So the trash incinerator gets placed there. When we choose where we're going to put highway extensions, we are typically putting them through low income communities, creating, not only breaking the communities apart. So we know this, and we literally have to deconstruct and rebuild the application of our policies to have our zone, getting into the weeds on zoning, being in the weeds on code enforcement and our code standards before we even get to the money. We have to have those things about how money flows in order to redirect money. And, and then making very clear decisions to ensure that on contracts for building, on contracts for access to resources, that they are targeted and directed to put money in to low-income communities in terms of jobs and promoting ownership of companies. I'll use one last example that isn't close to us here in the DMV, but in Palo Alto, California, that is the tech boom central, and the development and housing costs and the amount of wealth in Palo Alto is off the charts. East Palo Alto, by covenant, by city structure, had no rights over water, the water rights. So Palo Alto controlled the water rights for East Palo Alto. And what that meant was the low income communities and communities of color that make up East Palo Alto could not get in on the real estate boom that was happening all around them because they did not have the control of the water infrastructure. So we have to look everywhere and reconstruct everywhere in things that lead to housing.
I agree. It is a systemic issue. I mean, policy in general, and this is an oversimplification of it, but it's the reality. I believe that housing policy in this country has been a way to keep Black people and people of color out of your neighborhood, and out of white people's neighborhoods. And that's just the reality. So yes, I think, it is deep, and it's systemic. It's so systemic. Just this week, I was at a meeting with a housing authority where we were discussing a redevelopment that's happening here in the district. And the housing authority sets up LLCs to be able to do what they need to do, but they couldn't explain to us why they had set up this LLC. And the project manager, who is a Black man, says to residents on the call, well, they're basically a group that's been formed to make decisions about your lives. So this is the type of thinking that exists, where it's like, you know, you're going to get the very little we decide to give you, and we're the ones that are making the decisions. And of course, this is all based in systemic racism. In the district, we are seeing a change towards more racial equity, and they're supposed to be looking at things through a racial equity lens that was written into a rewrite of our city's comprehensive plan that recently took place. The comprehensive plan is supposed to be the guiding document on development in the city. However, while that's a step forward, we got to get like the zoning commission to fall in line. We got to get like every other agency that has something to do with this stuff in line. And of course, to begin to break down these, you know, these historic inequities that exist, but certainly something that we need to aspire towards and just do a lot of hard work towards, because, you know, this stuff doesn't just change because somebody said, oh, wait a sec, we have been doing something wrong. It's been people on the ground pushing for this change. So, you know.
Yeah, just I think these are really good comments that I have shared. I just have to add, as I said, we need to bring unity. We need to all be saying the same thing. I think we have not been united enough to join efforts and resources because we are all fighting against one giant systemic, you know, system that is being built, and it was us, the community, who have to let go because of power. You know, it's unfortunately we need to gain that back, and with that, that means that public sector and private, we need to get together and we need to work on those issues, and we need to impact public policies that will impact not just this generation but future ones. Because from what I'm seeing, you know, we are not forming a strong leadership moving forward. We all like distracted with what is going on now, but a lot of the things that are happening is being set up to destroy the future generation. So I care about my children now. What's gonna happen 10, 20 years from now? You know, I'm so consumed for what is going on now and not really getting ready for, you know, building up or getting the next generation prepared so we can have more community organizers, more leaders, more people are aware of what is going on, and then empowering people to really, you know, activate their voices. And I'm, you know, I'm talking about my own experience. Sometimes you just feel like I'm giving up. There's too much. They're too powerful. There's no way I can do it. But then you think about that when all these voices get together, we all have the same passion. There's a lot of people out there who has the same motivation and really want to do something for our community. So we need to be unified, and we have to be speaking the same thing. We have to forget about race for 1 minute, you know. And I'm so beautiful to see this panel, so diverse. We have the same passion. I'm from the Dominican Republic. I speak Spanish. There's all kind. But at the end of the day, what unites us is the same effort, what we want to see happening for our community. So one of the reasons why we joined in this coalition with environmental, you know, it's a regional one, is because we wanted to make sure that through the coalition, we can probably get more people united. And one thing that I said, listen, if this is not community focused, I don't gonna spend my time on it, because I've been in so many others. And sometimes, you know, people just get what they want, they leave, and that's it. We need to get the community back. We need to hear, we need to empower, and we need to all work together to ensure that, you know, public policies are impacted by the community for the community.
Yeah, I guess I would just chime in and add one small thing that I've always thought about housing, since you're talking about policy, is that housing is always housing, when we talk about housing, we say housing policy, but I feel like so many other policies all connect to housing, right? Housing is like a centerpiece for connecting transportation, urban like infrastructure, of course, and like greening, everything. And so I feel like till housing is integrated into thinking about all those things, it's not going to do the job. So that's just my thought also, just to add to all of your comments.
100%, because where we lay our head down at night and how, especially children, but our older adults, and how we wake up in the morning, right, is everything to how we move forward.
Right. So talking about now the housing crisis, we have numbers to show that DC, Maryland, the surrounding counties, we have a housing crisis, right? So what can be done to combat this housing crisis, so that low-income communities, minority communities, marginalized communities, they can have access to more housing? How do we do this?
So first, I think we got to start with, we have to think about sustainability of the ones that already have it. One of the things that we see, and I'm talking about real data as we speak, hundreds of people are losing their homes. They're about to lose their homes. They have no idea how they're gonna keep it. And so we need to start thinking, how can we keep those homes? How can we keep those people from losing their homes? That's one thing. There's a lot of issues. Some other people, those who are homeowners, but what about those who are renting right now? They are being behind. There's a lot of great programs, government programs that are, out there. However, they don't know about it. Second of all, besides they don't know the process, they don't know how to apply. And I'm talking about the low income community, minority community, who have no idea how to access those programs. They set it up in such a way that they failed. And I'll give you an example. A lot of these programs they set up where you got to upload all this paperwork in a portal. Do you think people know how to access a computer? They have to have an email, a passcode, I have no idea how to do that. And so we setting up these people, the first time they try, they say, this is not for me. They give up. They lose this opportunity. And then we see those other people who are already homeowners. They're thinking, how am I gonna keep my home? I'm behind. But I don't know how to work these programs. I don't know how to access the programs, the government programs that are there. I don't even know how to talk to the lender. They get intimidated. I'm telling you, you have the experience. For those of you who speak English, oh my goodness, that's so much easier. But imagine putting the shoes of somebody who doesn't even speak English. A lot of our programs, they're not being set up for a bilingual outreach. So a lot of people, they say, just go to the website. Once they go to the website, they don't find anything in Spanish specifically. I'm talking about my own experience. And so we have to be thinking about sustainability, helping those who are in a home right now. How can they keep it? Then second of all, how can we help those who are looking probably in the future to become a homeowner? How can we make it affordable? How can we make sure there's more? Here there is, unfortunately, we live in a life where houses around the the DC metro area, people cannot afford it anymore. They have to go all the way to Norton or Maryland to find something, and then they have to deal with their jobs, or they have to go all the way to Richmond to find something probably that is a little bit more affordable. So we're getting people out of the DMV area because it's not affordable anymore. There's nothing. And so we have to think about that. Also think about policies that will be able to help those, especially who getting into the workforce or into the home ownership, specifically those who have big debts in student loans. They cannot afford to buy a home now because of the debt to ratio, the debt to income ratio is too high. And unfortunately, that closed the door for them. And so there's so many different issues that we need to carefully think about and really set up our, our population that we serve currently to be able to afford a home, to be able to keep a home, and to be able to sustain the home in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, as an extension of what Walkiria was saying is, and I mentioned it before, is like holding on to what we have. I think the creation of new, deeply affordable housing. Affordable housing is a misnomer, especially in this area. The area median income just does not allow that. If everything is based on the area median income, so it is very difficult to build deeply affordable, low cost, low barrier housing. So holding on to what we have is really important. And I think once again, because of COVID, we are presented with new challenges of holding on to what we have, and we have to fight those battles. So for example, here in the district, well, not here in the district because I'm in Maryland, but in the district, the health emergency is over or has been declared over. That means that by October, landlords are going to be able to, go full steam ahead with evictions. So we are on this precipice of, never before seen or not seen in a good amount of time, evictions that could potentially happen. There are programs like Stay that are helping, but nonetheless, what we are, we need to ensure that that we are building in that defense to make sure that we're not losing. And that's important. It's not only important because we don't want folks to be evicted, but in the district, at least, what happens is if somebody leaves their unit, landlords can raise the rent higher than the annual, if it's a rent controlled property, which we're blessed to have in the district, they can raise it higher to the allowable percentage that happens every year. So there's this incentive, potential incentive for many landowners and developers to say, let's get these people out of here because we're going to be able to once again make more money. So those are the things that we have to look at in the short term, but in the long term, once again, I think we do need to push elected leaders, people making decisions around not doing just enough, right? Like in the district, there's inclusionary zoning that gives them just a couple of units of affordable housing, which is tied to the area median income. So it's not serving the family of 4 or the family of 5 or the family in general. Once again, for us, we need to build that people power to hold, excuse me, that's my daughters in the background, to hold elected officials accountable and to be able to deliver a political consequence. A lot of that is through voting, unfortunately, that doesn't happen every year necessarily. But once again, I think it is building that people power to say, this is what we want to see in the long-term planning for that.
I don't think I can add anything to these two brilliant people on this, except for to say that affordable in and of itself is not enough. We have to have really good standards on health. We have to good standards on accessibility, and we must start to get ownership of the development cycle and the development of properties to be owned by community and people who are from impacted communities that have been literally robbed of building wealth over generations by these policies, have to be the owners moving forward, or at least co-owners moving forward, because we cannot solve that issue until we change the fundamentals. And we only change the fundamentals by listening to people who have been forced to live in the concrete of poverty. And we have to break that. It used to be, right, before any of our time, even mine, that what you had in the United States was the ability to cycle out of poverty. and people would cycle in and out of poverty. Now, if you're in poverty, getting out of poverty is almost impossible. And so we have created concrete for when people fall into that. But I do think, I go back to the policy work, not just in the power of state, local, and federal government is the power to not only of where investments go, but the standards that must be in place about what are the rules of the game and how it will be applied and how it will be dispersed, disseminated, and shared. And we just do not do enough to think about the prescriptive nature, right, of that in policy, which we need to articulate, not to create more bureaucracy, but actually to create more clarity and more effectiveness. And that the goal of every piece of legislation should be, the measure should be how much money actually makes it to the purpose. And we have to move, I think, to measurable outcomes-based policies and investing. And if we have outcomes-based policies and investing, then it means we have to take the whole of community into account and stop looking at just kind of being numb to the disparities that we have and being driven by the outcomes that we should aspire to for everyone. We all on this platform right here have a relatively common fate, right? We have a short period of time on this earth together. We should be lifting every person up to the most healthy, joyful, opportunistic place that they can be. And we are all better. None of us want to see our communities or our fellow citizens live in rot, which is what we've allowed. And none of us benefit from that. None of us benefit from that.
And if I can add to this, we have to find a way to help more local investors to be those owning a lot of these, let's say, multi-units in our community. We don't want outsiders to be the ones, because we find out what's really shocking for us when we were doing the rental assistance program for this very low income community. This program is being designed that the landlord has to be involved in the process. Well, we realized that a lot of these tenants who wanted to apply for these programs, they were not able to submit a complete application just because the landlord, they were not willing to help. So I tried to find out who are those landlords in this very low income community. They didn't look like the people who live there. They had no sympathy with the people that are dealing and going through the issue. And so we have to think about how can we not just help, more people. It has to be built up. We got to start seeing our community to take over by the same people that have been here in the community for so long. And for that, it comes education. A lot of people, they don't do it, not because they don't want to, but because they have no idea how to. And so we need to start building up programs that will help future community-based investors who are the one, part of this community, and making sure that the community where they, grow up will continue to be affordable, will continue to be healthy, and will be a community, because we're losing the sense of communities, unfortunately. And so with that, it comes public policy. It also comes building up programs that can specifically target that specific population that we would like to start empowering, so that the community, we don't lose our community down the way.
And have the community be at the head and lead of measuring the racial equity impact.
Yes.
That it can't be outside researchers right? With all due respect to my wonderful and talented and brilliant friends at the University of Maryland and other institutions, side by side in the research of the measurement of the health and racial impact of how we change things, what we do, we should measure it for the good and the bad and be very clear and be uberly transparent. And every time we have someone measuring or evaluating work, there should be a community member in equal stead, right? Side by side in that measurement, in that evaluation. One of the best things we can do is empower communities to learn how data is their powerful weapon and really ensure that they can track and follow the dollars and know where they're going.
And even getting more local officials to empower them that are coming from the community without having to becoming outsiders to, you know, I've just been inspired to hear what is being said, but it's this, in order for us to maintain, and I think Daniel keeps saying it, we got to work with what we have. We got to sustain it. We got to keep it. We have to start investing in empowering leadership, and we need to work with what we have now, because we have thinking that we think that the answer is somewhere else, and it's right here. It's just that we're not paying attention to all the assets that we have right now in our community, because nobody's paying attention to it.
And apologies if you hear anything in the background. Part of remote living and working is my dog is having a daydream. So,
Oh, wow.
So just to echo that thought and say that, you know, empowering the community, even information, educating them to be able to help them, you know, understand the documents better and understand the policies better and advocate for themselves and participate more actively and, you know, be taken seriously in these processes. And a lot of you were saying, you know, talking about keeping what we have right now. And it reminds me of this Cabrini green housing that was in Chicago, I think many years ago, which was built as a public housing project, and it was eventually demolished. And it, you know, it housed a lot of people, had a great close-knit community, and then it was demolished because it was such a failure, because it wasn't built properly, wasn't built to code, and it was completely degrading. And so these things happen all the time, and, you know, and then there's a housing crisis because the housing we make is not made properly. So, which is a huge problem. And I think earlier someone was talking about cost, and, you know, like making housing is obviously a costly affair. And I'm actually an architect, and having made housing myself for low-income communities a few years ago, I know that good housing can be made with cheaper alternatives. It doesn't have to be expensive. And so this is also not an excuse to say that, you know, we can't provide housing because it's expensive. There's really no excuse. So yeah, just wanted to say that. So we have 10 minutes left for the session. And I want to give the audiences a chance to ask their questions. I have a few questions in the chat here. From Kathy. Kathy, if you would like to ask your question in the conversation, you're welcome to ask, or I can read your question out. If you would like to ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so my question, whoops, I think I'm getting an echo. Can you all hear me okay? I'm echoing back to myself. At any rate, so what I'm interested in is too often affordable housing and housing density are equated with little attention to the green building and infrastructure needed for both health, both physical and mental health, and climate resiliency, including heating and flooding. And I see little attention to that aspect of it, you know, particularly the affordable housing issue. And so I was wondering what the panel had to, and you've addressed some of this, I think a little more tangentially, although I came into the conversation a little bit late.
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, and this is a challenge we run into quite a bit, is this idea that density is the solution, right? Just build more units and it will solve the housing crisis. When that is not true. And, you know, while we weren't successful at this, but it's something that we continue to push at is, as Anushi mentioned, you know, in the work that we're doing at the Berry Farm neighborhood here in DC, we actually hired an architect to develop an architectural plan, an actual like architectural plan, not just like a vision of what we wanted to see, but like something that like lined up to what is, you know, following guidelines and policies and all of that. And we, you know, through that exercise, we did realize that there are alternatives to what was planned, or the kind of cookie cutter effect of like, let's just build as many units as possible. We struck a balance there because we know we're not going to totally get around the whole density thing, but we were able to keep the neighborhood feel, at least in our architectural plans, of the neighborhood that has since been demolished, but also create enough density to keep the developers at bay. At least that's what we envisioned with the architectural plan. So I think it's important once again, and I think this is part, unfortunately, a lot of times we are out organized because of timelines, but the more community planning, real community planning that we can do and start early before, you know, the developers are at the door, to really look at, you know, what are the needs of this community? What are the many options that are available, and not be led to believe that there is only one, you know, one path to take around all of this. But yeah, I think in short, this idea that density is the solution has to be just thrown out the window. It just doesn't work.
Any other comments?
Sorry, I was on mute. You were referring to heating. You know, we look at it as extreme heat and extreme cold, and how we have to address that. You know, we have to, for the world that I live in, which is the remediation, repair, and renovation of existing occupied housing. And we focus there because it has the highest deficits on health and huge disparities. You have to take care of and build the infrastructure around health and safety in order to do the energy efficiency work. So 62% of the time in Baltimore and Atlanta, weatherization assistance and energy efficiency grants to the lowest income families are deferred or declined because mold, mildew, moisture, lead paint. And those must be taken care of in order to have those other investments come. So we formed, actually in partnership with Barack Obama, GHHI, to align and braid those together in order to advance that work around energy efficiency. But as we look at the issue of climate, sorry, my apologies. As we look at the issue of climate, energy efficiency, and healthy housing, right? We have to take care of two things, right? Health and safety, so we can make those investments. But as we try to move families to electrification, off of natural gas, off of oil, one of the things that we have to also create now, the structures, the policies, the funding, is to take care of the market bump that will happen to actually drive up the cost for families to use electric over natural gas. It's better for the climate. It's not going to be economically better in the short run for low-income families. So we have to be thinking now about subsidy. We have to be thinking now about the programs that will allow low-income families not to get left behind in the climate issue, but actually can help lead the climate issue, as long as we build in a buffer of protection as we do work in low-income communities to advance climate work for housing in general. this is the broader thinking that has to happen. Obviously what is happening in surrounding communities and what is happening with flooding, we have to build more resilient and smarter placed housing. But I'm really concerned that we think about electrification in ways that allow us to do that for families. And we think about health and safety, which is necessary. If you put weatherization dollars into a house that's full of mold, mildew, moisture, and lead paint, you're going to seal up problems, make people sicker, and you're going to degrade your investment so much faster. So do the opposite and have better outcomes.
Definitely. And I wanted to resonate with Daniel about the point, a little comment you made about the neighborhood feel. And I think that a lot of times in housing conversations, in the midst of providing density and in the midst of fulfilling number needs and, just having something there, we forget about the quality. Something you talked about earlier was livability, and livability has a lot to do with social cohesion, social relationships. And I don't have numbers to prove it right now, but I know that in low-income communities, the community and neighborhood feel and the social relationships are so important for people to get by. And also, mental health and everything depends on that. And so thinking about neighborhood feel is very important when it comes to density and how, kind of how to match those two and find something that meets both things. Is I think also very important. So yeah, I think that's the end of, that brings us to the end of the session. I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think we can end. Any last thoughts as we close the session?
Sure, I just was gonna say there were so many other things that we didn't touch, that which we had the time to talk, like food, disparity, healthy eating, access to affordable and healthy food in housing in low-income community, where housing becomes also an issue. But I think one of the, I hope the takeaway from this conversation, I always like to say, is taking action. We cannot continue to identify the issues, but let's start moving into the solutions. And I think we are in a really good position now. And I feel this good statistic that just coming out of the census, it can help us to, understand the communities better. And also make sure again that we can unify it. There's so much that each and every one not just in this panel, but in the room, we have to offer. And so if we unify ourselves and do something about it, I know next year we'll be having different conversation. At least we'll be able to see improvement, and that's what we want to see happening. And with that, I will put my email address there for those of you who are interested in joining the Maryland State Coalition, the Environmental Justice Coalition. Is something completely different. We want to focus on how can we engage the community again, but we need all the private and public sectors to come together and that we can unify our voices, not just Maryland, but also DC. So I will put my information there. And for those of you who want the Zoom, the next meeting is gonna be this coming Tuesday from 9 to 12, or 10 to 12, I'm sorry, from 10 to 12. So that is a public announcement. I would love for you to join or to send somebody, because it's a really good momentum and we cannot lose it. And I'm so happy and glad that I was invited to this panel and, to hear from such a great panelist. Thank you.
Daniel, you want
Sure, yeah, thank you. I just want to thank my co-panelists. Thank you, MD, Anushi, thank you for having us this afternoon. And yeah, I think, for us as an organization that's been doing a lot of work around housing, public housing in general, we've, over the past couple of years, we've become more deliberate in making that tie between housing and health outcomes. And I would just encourage all of us, and I think it's obvious by the turnout of the session here, how important it is to continue making those ties and finding solutions to them. As Walkiria says, we need to take action and we need to be pushing in order to make any real change to really happen. So encouraged by the conversation, and yeah, let's just keep it going. So thank you all.
I couldn't agree more that we have to take action and engagement matters. And so each of us putting our energy and heart and authenticity into that engagement will attract others to come. And it's really important. We have to be committed to the work to be done. But I will say it's joyful work to be done because there's so much opportunity if we get it right. And there's so much impact to be made. For a quick action, I'm going to compel people to think about this. The Senate Banking Committee in the US Senate next week is meeting on $336 billion of housing funds and how they should use those funds through the budget reconciliation will matter. So we're fighting for money on lead-based paint removal, because as I said at the top of this, that's 84% of the reason that kids have their brains damaged through housing. Water is important. Other sources of lead are critically important, no doubt. But also ways to make housing healthier. We're fighting for $1 billion for healthy housing to go to Native American communities where housing conditions are also abysmal. But if people want to get engaged, there's one quick way to do that is to contact us. We'll help them get connected. I think joining coalitions that have focus that Walkiria's brought up is so important. And engaging in opportunities like the organizations here. We have plenty of opportunities for people if they are looking for work. We are growing, all of us, if they're looking for meaningful internships and fellowships, call us. Because even if we can't do that, or we don't, we're not exactly what you want, we're connected to people doing this work. We need more people in this army. We need more focus on it. It is the right and just thing to do. And I want us to become a country of environmental justice and not injustice. So thank you to everybody, and give my best regards to Sokobi Wilson. And thank you, University of Maryland, and our co-panelists.
Great. Thank you all again. Thanks to the audience for listening. Thanks to you all for your time and so many interesting conversations. I'm glad people are exchanging contact info, and I hope you all manage to get in touch and connect and work together. And yeah, we can end the session now. For everyone who's watching, the next session's at 3:40, the plenary session. So I encourage you to join there if you have the time, of course. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Likewise.
Likewise.